All right, let's jump right in. Today's explainer is all about the absolutely explosive, fascinating engine of capitalism. We're going to examine how financial booms and busts are deeply, inherently tied to technological progress. We tend to think of innovation as this purely positive force, just a steady upward march of progress. But the reality? Well, it's actually far more chaotic. It's a process that fundamentally relies on destruction just as much as it relies on creation. We'll map out this journey today by exploring what creative destruction actually is, the entrepreneurial agents driving it, the historical waves of technological change, whether or not we actually need financial bubbles, and finally, innovation without the crash. Section 1. What is creative destruction? Let's start with the economic forest fire itself. The foundation of this entire concept rests on one brilliant phrase: the perennial gale of creative destruction. The distinguished Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter popularized this idea back in his 1942 book, Capitalism, Socialism, and Democracy. He didn't see the economy as some static, peaceful machine. Instead, he described it as a relentless, living force of nature. He actually pulled the foundation of this idea from Karl Marx, who had noticed earlier that capitalism must continuously devalue existing wealth just to clear the ground for new wealth. So, what does this actually mean in practice? Essentially, creative destruction is the relentless mechanism where new product and process innovations completely replace outdated production units. Schumpeter literally called this the essential fact about capitalism. Economic progress is not some gradual slope. It's totally disjointed. It's an industrial mutation that revolutionizes the economic structure from the inside out. Basically, to clear the ground for new growth, capitalism has to continuously burn down its old structures. And this is a massive double-edged sword. On the creation side, you have the stuff we all love, right? New consumer goods, really exciting new methods of production, think AI or 3D printing, and entirely new markets. But then you have the destruction side. The generative forces of production inherently require the ruin of older established capital. Technology becomes completely obsolete, long-standing business procedures decay, and the old capitalists, well, they go bankrupt. We see this brutal cycle literally everywhere in the real world. Take Schumpeter's own example of the Illinois Central Railroad. Building it was incredible for business, but it spelled an absolute death sentence for the old agriculture of the American West. Or just think about music. Cassette tapes replaced 8-tracks only to be killed off by CDs, which were then completely undercut by MP3s, and now web-based streaming services have usurped all of them. Every single step forward leaves a trail of obsolete tech and bankruptcies in its wake. Section 2. The entrepreneurial agent. So, who exactly likes this match? Schumpeter drew a really fascinating, stark contrast here. You see, not all business owners are entrepreneurs in the Schumpeterian sense. The ordinary businessman behaves adaptively. They routinely use their given inputs efficiently just to maintain market equilibrium. But the Schumpeterian entrepreneur? That person is an agent of change. They discover unseen opportunities that everyone else is missing, and their primary function is to completely shatter the status quo. They aren't there to administer existing structures, they are there to destroy them so they can build something entirely new. So, what kind of DNA does it take to become one of these agents of change? Well, it requires extraordinary physical and nervous energy to push these massive visions forward, usually fighting against conventional wisdom every step of the way. They take on a terrifyingly high degree of risk and manage extreme uncertainty. They possess this almost irrational perseverance. And interestingly, profit isn't even their main driver. Profit is just a pathway to achieve a much larger purpose. Most importantly, they exercise real leadership, not just ownership, dragging the economy into entirely new paradigms. Section 3. Waves of technological change. Let's zoom out a bit. This pattern doesn't just impact single companies, it reshapes the entire world economy. Economic historian Carlota Perez has done some incredible work mapping these immense structural transformations over centuries. She developed a theory linking long waves in the economy, often called Kondratiev waves, directly to our transitions from one techno-economic paradigm to the next. If we trace this back across 200 years, you quickly realize the tech crashes of our lifetimes are actually part of a highly predictable historical pattern. Back in 1771, the age of mechanization led to the canal mania, which eventually crashed in 1793. Then, the age of steam and railways led to the railway mania crash in 1847. The massive age of the automobile and oil, that ended in the devastating 1929 Wall Street crash. And of course, the age of information and digital communications gave us the dot-com crash of 2000. According to Perez, every single new technological paradigm follows this incredibly chaotic life cycle. It kicks off with phase 1, installation. This is where new tech erupts into the market, sucking in investment money from literally wherever it can be found, triggering a period of wild, speculative frenzy. Then, inevitably, we hit phase 2, the crash, where the bubble bursts. But, and this is crucial, out of that wreckage comes phase 3, deployment. This is the golden age of synergy and maturity. The infrastructure is finally in place, and a few surviving corporate giants lead a massive expansion in worldwide productivity.
Section 4. Do we need bubbles? Which brings us to a really provocative question. Is the absolute chaos of a financial bubble just the necessary price of progress? The legendary economist John Maynard Keynes gave us a profound warning about this. He said, speculators may do no harm as bubbles on a steady stream of enterprise, but the position is serious when enterprise becomes the bubble on a whirlpool of speculation. See, Schumpeter noted that financing untried, highly risky experiments requires massive abnormal credit from banks. Because banks can just create credit independently of savings, they basically arm these entrepreneurs with the purchasing power to commandeer resources. But historically, that triggers intense financial speculation. Now, Carlota Perez makes a brilliant distinction between two different types of bubbles, showing us that not all frenzy actually yields a technological reward. First, you have major technology bubbles, or MTBs. These are driven by an opportunity pull in the real economy. Think of the 1990s internet mania. Sure, it crashed hard, but it left behind the incredibly useful telecommunications infrastructure that literally runs our world today. Contrast that with easy liquidity bubbles, or ELBs. These are driven purely by a cheap credit push, desperately searching for an object of speculation. The 2007 housing crisis is a perfect example. It didn't modernize our production structures at all. It just left behind widespread, devastating debt.
Let's put some hard numbers to that difference. $6.2 trillion. That is the massive amount of household wealth destroyed in the 2000 tech bubble. But here's the crazy part. Almost the exact same amount, roughly $6 trillion, was destroyed in the 2007 housing crash. Yet the tech crash caused a much, much milder recession. Why? Because the debt wasn't carried by the middle class. Tech stocks were held mostly by the wealthy, and their everyday spending habits didn't collapse. The housing bust, on the other hand, completely destroyed the primary wealth of the middle class, killing retail spending and plunging the entire world into the Great Recession.
Section 5. Innovation without the crash.
So the ultimate question is, do we absolutely need destructive venture speculation to fund our future? Some investment bankers will tell you that financial excess is just an unavoidable engine of innovation. Fortunately, speculative frenzy isn't the only game in town. We actually have patient, alternative capital that can commercialize innovation safely. First, there are the retained earnings of mature corporations. Think Google or IBM. They can fund massive moonshots, like self-driving cars, because their ownership structures insulate them from short-term Wall Street pressures. Second, government is a huge driver. Through military procurement, Medicare, or direct grants, the government often acts as the critical first customer for radical tech. And finally, research universities and nonprofit institutes commercialize innovations based on public interest, not just a quick stock market exit. By leaning heavily into these alternative funding sources, we could actually transition away from what economist Hyman Minsky called money manager capitalism, an era dominated by institutional investors demanding short-term quarterly profits, which inherently creates deep market volatility. We can actually decouple the absolute magic of innovation from the devastating asset bubbles that upend the real economy and harm everyday people. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. As we stand on the brink of the next great technological paradigm, whether that's artificial intelligence, breakthrough biotechnology, or a total clean energy revolution, we have to look at the landscape around us. If the core rule of capitalism is that it requires destruction to create, what existing empires, jobs, and long-standing institutions are about to be reduced to ashes just to clear the forest for new growth? It's a thrilling, yet genuinely terrifying question to ponder. Keep questioning the structures around you, and I will catch you in the next explainer.